welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us. Well, it is still a tough economy, how to budget your money and maximize your dollar. But first, guess what? Raise the minimum wage, and how about this? We're talking about medical marijuana. We'll get to those subjects after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
All right, many important topics to deal with. Those topics affect all of us in our pockets and in our social behavior. And joining me to do that is Marc Levy. He's with the Associated Press, and Angela Couloumbis with Spotlight PA, both journalists we have regularly on the program. All right, I have to start with the minimum wage. It's controversial. The House Democrats definitely for it. Republicans not so much for it. First of all, Angela, give us a little bit of the history of the minimum wage in our state.
Well, the last time the minimum wage was raised in Pennsylvania was 2009. And at this point in time, it is at the same rate as the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. And throughout the previous Governor Wolf's term, he tried every single year in his 8 years in office to get it raised, and he could not get it through. It was a different time then. The legislature, both chambers, were controlled by Republicans. There is, fast forward to today, there is some momentum. There is the House, which is now controlled by Democrats, recently passed, this past week, passed an increase to the minimum wage to $15 an hour over time, over the next few years. It doesn't
go up immediately from $7.25 to
right. It would
15,
be on a sliding scale.
Slides, right.
And in 2026, it would reach 15. It now is in the hands of the Senate. The Senate is controlled by Republicans. It has shown in the past that it is willing to pass a minimum wage hike, just not to $15. Yeah. So there is some room for negotiation.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big point. We've got the House in Democratic hands, the Senate in Republican hands. And when it did pass the House, it literally got, was it 2 Republican votes, something like that, out of all the Republicans there.
Yeah.
So, back to Angela's point, maybe it gets raised, but not the $15 an hour.
Right. So what we've heard from the Senate Majority Leader, Joe Pittman, is that $15 is a non-starter with the Republican caucus in the Senate. But he has not dismissed out of hand the idea of raising the minimum wage. And in fact, the Senate has voted to raise the minimum wage before. I believe it was 2019. Now, it was a very moderate increase to somewhere in the 9s, maybe around $9.50 over time.
Hour, yeah.
But it was the House Republicans who had control of that chamber at the time who killed it. So it has a chance. But like Joe Pittman said, $15 is a non-starter for that caucus there. The other important point about this bill is that it would raise the tipped wage. So the tipped wage right now is like $2.80 an hour. It would raise it over time to be 60% of the minimum wage. So when it reaches $15 in this bill, would be $9.
Yeah. Are lawmakers saying there's a lot of pressure on them from constituents? Where I mean, obviously we know that the labor unions and Democrats. Is there overall? Are they saying they're getting there's a lot of interest in this?
Well, yes, because if you look back over the last few election cycles, including this last one, Democrats have run, including Governor Shapiro, have run on this platform that includes raising the minimum wage. They say it is an embarrassment when states surrounding us all have larger minimum wages, that Pennsylvania is at, the bare minimum level.
Right.
And it would be a significant policy win heading into a very important election year next year, being 2024, presidential election. People are paying attention. So it would be a great talking point for them.
All right, let's run to a break. When we come back, every time we talk about, obviously, marijuana is not legal in the state of Pennsylvania. Its use for medicinal purposes has been more lately a subject of debate. We'll get to that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Expanding access to medical marijuana, it's become a big issue, and Marc Levy is going to explain it to us. All right, where does that stand? So, well, first of all, what is it? Explain what it is first.
What medical marijuana is right now in this state for the last 5 years, you have if your doctor is willing to prescribe it for you and you meet one of the 24 conditions that are set out in the regulation, you can go to a dispensary with your medical marijuana card and your prescription, and you can buy it in various forms, whether it's a cream, whether it's the leaf that you smoke, or whether it's like an oil. So what we have now is a package of bills that came out of a Senate committee that would do a number of things, but most importantly, it would get rid of that list of conditions that you have to meet one of them to qualify. It would basically just say that a doctor who's qualified to prescribe it can prescribe it for any condition that he or she wants. Yeah. So it would expand access to it from that standpoint. It would also allow dispensaries to sell in edible form, which is a major way in which people consume marijuana and medical marijuana these days. That's not allowed yet in Pennsylvania. And the context here, Terry, is that more and more states are legalizing it for adult use, period, just recreational use.
Right, recreational use.
Including New Jersey, New York, Delaware, and Maryland.
That's often cited states around us.
Right.
Go ahead.
And right now we're at more than 20 states nationwide that have legalized it for adult use. And I think lawmakers in Pennsylvania know that the Republican majority in the Senate will not pass a bill to legalize it recreationally, so this may be the next best thing in their minds, is to essentially free up some of the regulations that tightly control it and to make it a little bit more user-friendly until there are legislative majorities that may support legalizing it for recreational purposes, which is something that Josh Shapiro, the governor, supports.
And if it gets out of the Senate, it is likely to pass the House, would you? Would you agree?
Yes, there's been a lot of Democratic support for it, if for no other reason, is that you can also tax it once it is legalized and make quite a bit of revenue off of it. And seeing that the state is always in a crunch, or they think they're in a crunch right. during budget season, looking for new sources of revenue. This potentially could be one. Yeah. Personally, I don't see it happening this budget cycle, but right. potentially going forward, we might see it come up.
And there's
again.
No doubt where Governor Shapiro stands on it, so he would sign that bill in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, the environment now is that people in Pennsylvania can get it from other states, and there's CBD products all over the place. So it almost feels like sometimes there's a very thin line between, keeping it as medical marijuana and just legalizing it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't think anybody, I know as a professor, I wouldn't want any of my students' lives ruined, their careers ruined because they were smoking a small amount of pot. I mean, I'm not getting into legal, that's right. for somebody else, but who wants some young person's life ruined by having them go to jail or get a permanent record. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, and there have been, separately, there have been efforts to really, through criminal justice reform measures, to really help people like that whose lives have been impacted by these, low-grade arrests many, many years ago. But going back to the point of House Democrats, or Democrats generally, would support full-on legalization. This is just short of that, and it would be a negotiation, but I think they would certainly be open to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on. These are two very, very important topics. All right, as I said, it's still a tough economy. Budgeting your money is very, very important, and we'll get to those topics and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by CrossState Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
Outside of Harrisburg.
Yeah.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, as I indicated before, it's a tough economy, and we're going to talk about things like budgeting your money and how to deal with a variety of other subjects related to budgets, spending, and maybe get into student loans, which are an important part of the economy as well. Joining me to do that is Patrick Conway. He's the president and CEO of CrossState Credit Union Association, and Daniel Wolford. He's the president and CEO of the Lebanon Federal Credit Union. All right, Daniel, I'm going to start with you. How to budget money. First of all, do you think it's a common practice for people to budget, or do they just get a bill and write a check out or go pay the bill? What's the practice here?
I think a lot of people think that they budget their money. Most people do not, or could do a better job if they are. And it's just not one of those topics that people tend to be passionate about. But budgeting is so very vital for having balanced, healthy financials as individuals.
Well, how do you budget it? Tell the folks how to do it.
Yeah, different ways to do it. Some people use a spreadsheet to keep track of their monthly income. My favorite approach that I recommend to our members is to use an app. There's great free apps that you can download on the Apple or Google stores. They really make managing your money easy. And I think that's one of the keys to budgeting. If it's too difficult, you're just not going to do it.
Yeah, true.
Really, people think of budgeting sometimes as limiting their ability to manage finances, but really a budget, when it's done properly, really empowers people to know where they're spending money and to even have certain areas where we like to go out to eat or rest. So your
point is, if you write it down and you do it, let's say, on an app, as opposed to doing it in your head, you're going to be more successful with the former.
100%, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And how about your taxes? How do they fit into that? We all have to pay them.
Those are often coming off first, so your budget is going to be using your after-tax or net dollars. That's how the budget should be based off of.
Yeah. We have something here. I'm going to read it because you wrote it down. Divide your income among needs, wants. I love that. Needs versus wants, and then you have savings and debt repayment.
Yep. Yeah. So a balanced budget is kind of covering all of those areas. And really, that budget is a key tool to make sure that you're taking control of your money and your money is not taking control of you.
Yeah. So you got to, you get, Patrick, you get a budget plan, but you also have to monitor your progress.
That's right. And I agree with Dan. Use an app, write it down. If you're conscious about your budget and it's in front of you and you're looking at it, it's just not in your head, you do tend to stick with it. And I think maximizing your dollars is another important factor. And, reach out to your financial institution, talk to your community and your credit union about options on interest rates or CDs. And, in this environment, it's an unusual time, but but look at your earning potential on your money as well.
You have needs, things that you absolutely need, and then we all want something. We all have something we want, and then there's saving and debt repayment. I mean, there are many aspects to this. It's not simple.
Right, and you've got to just have that balance. Needs come first, obviously, with a family or a business budget, but wants are important too. Travel, people are spending their dollars these days on experiences, in some respects, post-pandemic. So travel, family activities, those kind of wants are important as well, but they tend to come after needs. Debt reduction, being smart about your budget and how you're handling your money is really important as well.
And we have things that we could divide between a want and an absolute need. I mean, now there's a lot of technical equipment that we need to literally function. That's not a want any longer; it's a need.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, technology has been a key player in that, and maybe it adds additional cost, but it adds additional benefits when we use it for things such as budgeting, tracking our finances, online banking, those sorts of opportunities.
All right, how to maximize your dollar. We'll get to that subject.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, another aspect of dealing with your finances is referred to as managing your dollar, and there are steps that the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics says should be done. What are they?
Well, the first thing we like to advise consumers is talk to your financial institution. As I said earlier, I think credit unions are a great example of a financial institution that's interested in helping people, and the sooner you can contact your trusted financial advisor in your community with your financial institution, the better. In terms of maximizing your interest rates, looking at long-term savings, in the short term, you can generate more income on your money by putting your resources in CDs. So there's a lot of tools available in addition to having a well-prepared, well-thought-out family budget. Maximizing your dollar with your financial institutions and with your investments.
So the whole point in here, make sure you're not paying an excessive interest rate. And if you have a savings account, that you're getting the best interest payment rate on that savings account. So we're really talking about what I would consider to be sort of practical steps as well. But that's not something that everybody does. Is that correct?
That's right. I think people tend to have they'll maybe park money and kind of forget that it's sitting there. And so looking for ways at a credit union to maximize those dollars is important. Maybe the inflation rate is slowing down, but prices will remain elevated and people are struggling financially. So every opportunity to make some additional income to put your money to work only benefits you as a consumer.
And there's also long-term versus short-term savings. Long-term versus short-term savings.
Exactly. And I think looking at your cash flow needs can help dictate what that planning is going to be for your family. But if you can sock some of that money away for a longer period of time and generate more income, obviously that's a good thing.
And you often talk about certificates of deposit is that for short-term?
They can be both short-term and long-term. Credit unions typically offer anywhere from a 6-month up to a 60-month, 5-year certificate of deposit. And it's a great way to really maximize your dollars right now. For the first time in well over a decade, savers can really earn very attractive rates on deposit. For example, our credit union is running a 50-month certificate promo right now that's at 5%. And that's not an uncommon rate that you would find at most credit unions throughout the Commonwealth.
I'll bet you there's something that I'm going to ask you about that not too many people do, and that is a credit card that says get cash back.
And that's another that's another option for consumers. And Dan and his staff at the credit union could speak to that. But that's another tool, I think, for people to consider as well.
Yeah, it could be a great tool for you're spending the money. Why not get some additional money because of those expenditures we have to make? But you do have to be careful because it's a great way to maybe generate additional dollars. But you got to make sure that you're not racking up balances that you can't later repay. That only makes things worse.
All right, well, as a college professor who had thousands of students during his career, I have to ask you about federal student loan payments. And as you know, there's always a big debate. We know what the President of the United States wants to do about people with loans, student loans. So talk a little bit about payment, resuming payments.
Well, for the first time in many years since the COVID-19 pandemic, student loans, federal student loans, payments will be resuming soon.
Right.
Part of the budget is that about 60 days after June 30th of this year, federal student loan payments will kick back in. So borrowers need to make sure that if they've maybe grown accustomed to not having to make those payments, that they have funds in their budget to do so.
Yeah. So, but we don't exactly know yet when that will occur, do we? According to what I've read, it says soon. But is there a specific date that you're aware of?
I'm not sure that a date has been established, but the act was 60 days post June 30th, so
somewhere around the beginning of September.
It's coming soon, and I think a lot of families may be surprised because they haven't been making those payments.
Let me make this point: if you have a student loan, you need to be heavily involved in all aspects of it, not just okay, you're getting the money and you're making the payment, right?
That's right. You know, and for those borrowers who maybe they're struggling and they find out what that new payment is going to be. First of all, contact the servicer. They'll be able to give an estimate to you what that monthly loan payment is going to look like. Yeah. And if that payment is maybe not going to fit well into your budget with all the other pressures going on financially right now, it's a good time to talk to your federal student loan servicer about maybe income-based repayment options, which could offer, at least for temporarily, a much lower monthly payment.
I'll tell you, some of the student debt is stupendous. That's the only way I'll put it. I mean, you're talking about having to repay that debt over not just years, but decades.
It is, and that's an important part of the budgeting process we talked about earlier. You know, young adults are coming out of college with huge debt loads, and managing that and planning for that as you move forward as a young professional is important.
All right, before I let you go, how optimistic are you about the state of the economy?
I think the state of the economy fundamentally is strong. I have a lot of confidence in consumers and businesses, and you know, certainly there's weaknesses going on right now. There's pressures from inflation, costs, but I think fundamentally things remain strong.
We keep hearing the word recession, but we've not slipped into one, and we still have a lot of, you can't drive anywhere and not see help wanted with lots of people have dropped out of the workforce. That's
right. The employment market, you know, the economy being what it is, it's a very unusual time. Fortunately, we haven't entered a recession, but I agree with Dan. I think generally things are sound. Inflation's coming down a little bit. Price increases have moderated to some extent. So those are positive signs, I think, for the economy.
Yeah, and we seem sort of, I won't say stuck in place, but no big change has taken place.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. Important update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, you stay well.